Professor John Fischetti has made his way into the studio. John, welcome. For a long time now, you've been saying we have a real crisis. We have a shortage of teachers in Australia, and it's going to become very problematic. And it was only in the news bulletin today that they were throwing out all sorts of statistics. One of them was that in New South Wales alone, we have 1,100 positions that need to be filled with teachers. So there is some issues, and the government is proposing a new plan that may help this. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, good morning, Sarah. It's nice to be so close in the studio. It seems like old days.
It is. We're sitting side by side today.
The fundamental key to kids doing well in school is having great teachers. But what if we don't have enough of them? And right now, New South Wales and all of Australia has a shortage, particularly in secondary and in science, technology, engineering, and math. There's other areas as well, but that's the real need area for the quality teachers we need.
That's the STEM areas.
Some of those are in rural and remote areas, but you'd be surprised that there are very few casual math teachers, for example, in Sydney today as we finish term 2. So how do we grow the population of teachers? Meanwhile, the number of kids is increasing, so we're actually going to need more teachers anyway. We have a retirement from some baby boomers, and we have natural attrition from the profession all the time. So this is a real crisis because we need every child to have a great teacher in front of him or her. That's one of the sort of hallmarks of a great society. And we're coming up a bit short.
So, John, why are people not finding teaching so appealing now? We know the hours are huge. And if you've ever lived with a teacher or you are a teacher, you would know the amount of work that you take home. You don't just go home and switch off. It really, it continues. Yeah. It's just report time at the moment. I know the hours that go into that. Is it the workload? Is it the pay? Is it just not as appealing? Are the kids harder to teach? What do you think?
We learned last year the value of teachers in all the families that were trying to do schooling from home, even in most of our country where it wasn't for too long, although some states a little longer, that teachers are this incredible resource. Actually, enrollments are up in education. There are some people who choose to go to teaching who really aren't right, and they settle out and go to something else. The government would say maybe even 40-50% of those that start. I look at that as a compliment because we basically get those students to choose something else. The key is how to find more, and particularly there's a population of mid-career, mature age folks who bring STEM backgrounds who might be able to get into the classroom sooner. We currently have a degree program in Australia called the Master of Teaching. It's a 2-year way, if you have your undergraduate qualifications, that you can become a teacher. Well, that 2 years now, the government's saying they'd like to chop back to 1.
Okay.
And in doing so, we could make some really good headways in getting people in sooner. But there's a little buyer beware, because just because we get them there quicker, it means that they won't have had as much practical experience in internships. And that could mean we risk putting someone in the classroom who's either A, not good for kids, or B, not ready. So we're going to need to be careful because these shortcut models called Teach for Australia, there's Teach for America, have gotten some really good people energized to come to teaching, but actually there's a huge exodus from those programs because people just don't feel ready. Like yourself or Graham here in the studio with us, if we said, come on into the teaching now, you just might go, wait a minute, deer in headlights, and run away as fast as you came in.
Absolutely. You might know your subject matter inside out, but then you've got to mesh and know how to manage children and teach children, and that's or young adults, and that has a whole new set of issues. So this proposal is for professionals at the moment, people that, might be halfway through their careers or just experts in a particular subject matter. And the idea is to entice them to be able to step into teaching within 12 months. Does that include practical work as well?
So it would mean in our MTeach configuration probably one practicum experience. And I think one of the solutions, Sarah, is that we might, at the end of a first year, and allow people who meet the qualifications, as you just indicated, show promise in their first practicum to be able to be engaged to go get that teaching position and then finish the degree while they're teaching. So they'd still be attached to the university and attached to the supports, and also get some of the courses in special education, in technology, in pedagogy and curriculum, which they wouldn't know based on their prior career. Because you can think it's easy to just go in and teach a textbook, but we're actually teaching children, and we have to teach them really well. And so that might be the compromise in here, is for some who are qualified and look like they're going to be great, we give them that option. And if the government wants to hire them, we allow them in our university programs, sort of a 2-track Master of Teaching program.
Yeah, okay. Has this model been trialled elsewhere, and has it been successful thus far?
For the last 30 years or so, there have been versions of these teachers all around the world. They're generally successful. The tricky part is for people used to high salaries that come into teaching, it's a real burden to go off the pay grid. And so long term, what we need to do is really consider the salary schedule for teachers. We way underpay them, and we assume all the extra work they do is just because they're nice people. So if we really need more teachers in certain disciplines, we might have incentives for them, which pay them additional amounts of money. Particularly in rural and remote areas, we also need pathway programs that get more people into university in the rural and remote areas using a combination of specific programs for them and online degrees, because really the solution in rural and remote areas is to grow our own. Great people who stay home and teach. If we continue to provide mercenary support, wonderful people, but they go for 2 or 3 years, that churn with kids isn't necessarily helpful.
Yeah, it is. And there needs to be more of an incentive to do it. As a teacher's daughter, we went to Ningen, we went to all the small towns, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, you do. So, all right, John, so this model's definitely coming in at this stage, or is it still a proposal by the government?
There's only a handful of levers the government can push. One of them that is to get more people who have that mid-career background. Remember in the Newcastle area, we did that with BHP as it was closing. Hundreds of people came into teaching through that pathway. Many of them stayed their entire careers and are just retiring now and have been brilliant. Not everybody that says they'd like to be a teacher will be, so we just have to do this buyer beware. Would you want your child in front of that person, with that person in front of them? And if the answer is no, we got to be really careful and select carefully as well.
Most definitely. Professor John Fischetti, thank you for coming in,
Sarah.
as always.
2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.